So why do you think there are people out there who don't have trust? Do you think it's just like a lack of understanding of how it works?
I think it's three reasons. The first is it's expensive. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, trust can cost anywhere between $4,000 to $10,000 to create, depending on my entities. You're right, that's expensive. But if you own 100 rental properties and you're freezing the capital gains on just one of them that you're going to sell in the future, you're saving so much more. It's expensive up front. I think the other misconception is that, at least when I was growing up, I was told that, oh, trust fund babies have a lot of money. Like, trusts are for people who have money. Trusts are for people who want generational wealth, who want to protect the wealth for those that they're building it up. And when we change that mindset, it's how we can allow people to actually see trust as a different utility. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't have money, I'm fine. Okay, you don't have money right now, you might still have debt if something horrible happens. And the third is, nobody really wants to talk about their own demise.
Welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Show with Ryan Greenberg and Nick Kalfas. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Millionaire Show. We're here with Diana Khan. Diana.
Diana.
How you doing, Diana?
Great.
Sorry, it's a whole new set here. It was an hour and 15 minutes, well, actually maybe 2 hours now of setting up. Thank you for being patient.
Of course. Don't lie, though. You did this just for me. You wanted to change it up.
Yeah, we're going to change it up again next week for the next podcast. So
Perfect.
Every week we're going to go with a new set. But it's great. Nick, how you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for coming.
Of course.
So I had you here because my lawyer cost me $450 an hour to talk to. And I figured, hey, if I have Diana, I can ask all the questions I was going to pay my lawyer.
For free.
Now Diana's my lawyer. So now I could get all this free law information.
I am so glad he outed himself this early in the podcast. So now I can talk about all his crap. Guys, I know all his secrets. I'm really here to disclose it.
So Diana owns DK Law Group.
I do.
What do you guys focus in? Why don't you give me a little elevator pitch?
Yeah. So I actually own several businesses. I own 3 real estate brokerages. I own a property management company. And law was sort of the thing I wanted to do long term. But the problem with law is that, as you know, it costs $450 an hour to get hired. And then you can't really help people in our industry the way I wanted to. So I started the brokerages, I started a title company, and then I started helping people on the law side, and I could kind of choose and pick my clients. So our law firm started doing all of real estate. I've been in real estate for 15 years. So I've done everything from regular transactions. I'm a real estate broker, assumptions, loan modifications. I've personally negotiated about 9,000 short sales. So I've done sort of all of it, right? And the good news about that is that if you call me, there's really not a situation where you can be like, hey, I have this situation. What do I need to do? And people are like, this lawyer doesn't know what they're doing. I just, for example, went toe to toe with the Coldwell Banker corporate attorney at a mediation. And she said something and it was completely wrong. And I just looked at her and I was like, with all due respect, that's wrong. And she just stared at me. And I was like, it's not even that, want to be rude, but I've been here for 15 years. You're not local to Maryland. Anyway, we won that. Outside of real estate, we do all sort of business formation. A lot of you probably have your own LLCs. I know you do. Obviously you do. The problem is all of you guys call me and you're like, I have an LLC. I can't get sued. So I realize that this is true probably 20% of the time because whoever started your LLC didn't give you those formation docs. They didn't protect you, the litigation, operating agreements, all that stuff that starts out. So commercial law with residential, all of it. And then my new niche is trusts and estates and estate building to kind of tie in all of us in real estate. If you're not doing your estate planning, you're really not protecting your wealth. You're growing your money, but you're not protecting wealth for those coming after you. And that's kind of where my new focus has kind of been on, to get people who contact me for real estate, contact me for property management. Hey, let's talk about how to save that money over the course of whatever. So when Nick's 3-year-old turns 18, he makes sure that whatever he's built will stay around and not just go away.
So at what points should somebody looking into getting a trust?
Oh, right away.
Can you explain first what a trust is?
Yeah.
Just a brief summary for somebody that doesn't.
Yeah. So the easiest way to think about it is all of your stuff and all of your stuff. You're walking around with your stuff in an envelope, right? Just picture all your money, your residential properties, anything you could possibly equate that you're worth is in an envelope and it has your name on it. has your name on it, right? Like your name, first, last name. So if somebody sues you, somebody comes after your stuff, they come to this envelope, they come and grab stuff out of that envelope because they're suing your assets. So when you create a trust, you're essentially creating another envelope. Now that envelope no longer has your name on it. We name it whatever we want. And we make a contract and we say, while I'm alive, I control the assets, but I'm no longer the owner of that trust. Basically, I'm the vehicle that controls it during my lifespan. I still have access to my money. I still have access to everything. But what I'm doing is I'm actually giving it to my family, or I'm giving it to my children prior to death, and I'm doing it now. So I create this new envelope. I put all my stuff in it. Now, my personal envelope, your personal envelope is empty. So if you ever get sued, on paper, your assets are zero. They can't go after that trust. So you're essentially creating this ability to avoid litigation. For the property management people, or those who own rentals, if you do what's called an irrevocable trust, one that you can't change, and you put your rental properties in it, it freezes the tax assessed value. So in very simple terms, Baltimore City, you buy a house, it's $100,000, put in a trust. You want to sell it in 15 years, it's now worth 450. You're paying capital gains on the 100K when you created the trust. So long-term investing, it's great. Litigation-wise, it's great. It also allows you to control what happens after you die.
So one question would be, when you're setting up a trust and then you're going to the bank to ask for loans, do they get to see that as your assets? Because, as real estate investors, we're trying to go to the bank. We're trying to get them to give us money and leverage to buy more real estate. How does the trust look on like your balance sheet?
So it depends on how you're doing it, right? If you're doing like a hard money loan or anything like that on your business, the trust owns the business, but the LLC is still its own entity. So you can still prove income and assets that way. All you're doing is just kind of separating it from yourself. If you're doing it as a personal entity, your trust only has assets, but it has no debts. So if you're doing like a paycheck, or those of us who are not 1099 or like making money, your DTI is still going to come in for your lender because you're still making money as your own personal person. When you want to prove that the bank account for the trust belongs to you, lenders will accept that, because all I'll do is I'll issue a document that says, this is yours, you're the primary trustee, you have full authority to it, and most lenders will accept it. The issue you're going to face is when you buy the house, you're not going to be able to put it in the trust name right away, because you can't take out a loan for somebody who's not making income, right? But you can flip it into the trust as soon as you're done buying that house. So you basically buy it as Ryan or Nick. 2 minutes later, you're just like, I'm going to quick claim deed it into the trust to provide that protection. The deed of trust, which is the lender, will still have a deed of trust on the property. And as long as you stay current, you can keep it in the trust in your name, in the trust's name, and keep paying the mortgage. You're fine.
Could you buy it in your LLC and then do the same transfer into the trust afterwards too?
Yeah. So when we create a trust where there's LLC involvements, we essentially do a business trust where the business trust will own the LLC. So you can still kind of do the entity as an LLC. But what that allows you to do is partnerships, right? Like you can do a lot more with just outside of your operating agreement to make sure that, hey, if I die and we have a partnership, our business trust is going to talk about what part of the LLC is covered after my death. And then there's no taxes on that for your family. And there's no taxes for, your spouse or your kids or anything like that. You can also do things that I like a lot is if I own several businesses, I don't want to die and that legacy to go away. Maybe it's just me. But if you have a business trust, you can say, when I die, my portion of the business is not going to be sold, or we're not going to sell this company for 5 years. Or you can put your intentions prior to death, which some people like because, if you guys own a business together, you have a kid, you may say, after I die, my portion of the business, you're going to maintain that business for the next 15 years. And 10% of my profits, instead of going to my spouse or, my girlfriend, you're going to put those in investment stocks for my kid when they turn 18. And you could do all that up front. So, if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, you have your intentions written out.
And so can you sell a trust to somebody else, or can you just pass it along? Like, does that have to be predetermined?
So you don't have to sell a trust. You can just switch the trustees. You can't really make a profit off of it, but you're the main trust to your trustee. Like you're the trustee, you're the controlling factor, you sign. So you have the chance to change it anytime after you create it. So you can make somebody else a trustee. You can say, a portion of the funds, I still make all the decisions, but a portion of those funds go to another person. It's really a contract that you're creating for your future, and you can kind of make it whatever way you want.
And are there any loopholes for somebody to come after the trust? that have your assets in it, but technically you're not the owner?
Not really, because trusts are supposed to be kept private, and they are definitely protected by the court systems. The only things you're going to look at is if you're doing like Medicare or Medicaid planning for those who want to create trust later in life. Again, if your envelope is zero, you qualify for government benefits, right? So a lot of people will put all their savings in a trust so that when they get older, they can still qualify for Medicare and Medicaid because they don't want to put that money away. So if you do that with the intention to avoid debt or the intention to avoid, like, be able to qualify for that, there's essentially a way to break it. But if you do it ahead of time and you plan ahead of time, then good luck breaking that. You're not getting sued or anything like that.
So why do you think there are people out there who don't have trust? Do you think it's just like a lack of understanding of how it works?
I think it's three reasons. The first is it's expensive. It's not, you want a will, go to rocketlawyer.com. They spit them out for $250. You shouldn't really do that anyway, but it's expensive, right? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, like trust can cost anywhere between $4,000 to $10,000 to create, depending on my entities. And I'm like, okay, you're right. That's expensive. But if you own 100 rental properties and you're freezing the capital gains on just one of them that you're going to sell in the future, you're saving so much more. It's expensive up front. I think the other misconception is that, at least when I was growing up, I was told that, oh, trust fund babies have a lot of money. Like, trusts are for people who have money. And I am trying very hard to break that. I'm trying to say trusts are for people who want generational wealth, who want to protect the wealth for those that they're building it up. And when we change that mindset, it's how we can allow people to actually see trust as a different utility. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't have money, I'm fine. Okay, you don't have money right now. You might still have debt if something horrible happens. And the third is nobody really wants to talk about their own demise.
So for the one that you freeze, your tax assessment now, when you go to sell that in the future, is it getting sold out of the trust and then the trust no longer exists after that? Like if I sell it to just some random person?
So, and for those of you who have done title, it depends how you label the trust, right? Normally what I say is for every house, you should have a separate trust just for that house so that when you sell the house, that trust no longer exists. You're sort of closing the loop on liability. Yes, but you would sell it out of the trust. And in Maryland, you basically just have a document that says, my name's Nick or my name's Ryan. I'm the trustee for this trust and I have the right to sell this property. And the title company just wants to see that. They want to see the trust to see that you can make those decisions. And then you sell it just like that. You just sign your name as the trustee instead of just your personal name with nothing else. Unless, of course, your trust says something like you can't sell it because you need permission from your spouse or something crazy.
So what would you pay, like if the house right now is worth $100,000, what would you pay to put it in a trust?
Usually the transfer tax consideration on $100K is about 1% to 2%. So you're looking at the trust costs plus the 1%. Yeah.
And can you amend a trust at any time to add additional properties to it that you already have properties in?
And that's the difference between most lawyers, right? Most lawyers will be like, no, once I create the trust for you, like you're solid. The way I see it is like, for those of us in real estate, right? We don't charge people to just amend the contract. And I find it the same way. You have to change the trust, but I will either make it easily available for you to contact me and just add that house as part of your assets, or two, give you the ability to do it yourself. Your trust in general has what's called like a magic wand provision. Attorneys are horrible. They come up with the weirdest words, but it's like, we magically, anything I own now and in the future goes in the trust. So the house would be included. But again, for those of you who are doing investments like we are, I would still advise you to have an attorney create just a singular trust for that rental property. My law firm will provide those kind of free of charge. Of course, I'll be like, hey, do you want to use my title company since I'm doing the recordings? But for the most part, you're getting a service where most lawyers will charge you God knows how many hours, and it'll take you like 7 weeks to get an appointment.
Okay, so one trust per property is what you're recommending. And then in those trusts, there's some sort of provision. I'm just like trying to summarize it because it's a lot.
It is a lot. I spoke a lot.
In that trust, there's a provision that says you can sell it or you can't sell it. So like if I had a kid and I wanted them to keep that as like a legacy property, I could just say this house can never be sold. It'll just have to be in the family forever. That's something.
Correct. Yep. You can do whatever you want. You can even say it'll be sold when they're 33 and married. I've had people write trusts that their cats will stay in the property till the cat dies.
So let's say
Your
years,
face.
like let's say years go by, and let's say 30 years or maybe in 50 or 60 years, and like you said, you can't sell the property. Does it just come up in the title search, and that's like a part of like the document that says, hey,
So
this was in a trust, you can't sell this property at all?
a title search will just show that it's named in the trust, right? So any title company who wants to sell it will need copies of the trust to see it in full. Now, remember, when you die, a will is public, right? The moment you die, everything you've willed and you've put in writing, anybody can look it up. A trust is completely private, so you have a little bit more privacy, except with the title company. The title company will need to see it to ensure that, hey, this person can sell it. So they can find in title that it's titled in the trust, but they'll need to look at that trust to confirm it. And that's another reason I always push for one property, one trust. Sort of, if you can think about it, it's a scale. You have the family trust, which is your family legacy, and then we just kind of branch off in smaller trusts that just handle each property individually. So when you need to sell, this property or, one of the properties, the title company is just reviewing the trust for the property, and you're not outing yourself on all your huge net worth.
And how long is the document that they have to read to determine what are the
So it's usually about 10 pages if it's just for the house. If it's for everything, it's like 130 pages. But in the state of Maryland, at least in Maryland, you can have what's called a certification from a law firm that just says, my name is Diana Khan. I drafted this trust, or I've reviewed this trust on behalf of XYZ. On page X, it gives them the right to sell, and then I sign that, and most title companies will accept that as a document instead of reviewing the trust, as long as it doesn't come from you directly. And the reason being is because, they can't really trust that the trust says XYZ. They have trust issues.
Right? That's a lot of trust. So to go on the other end of the spectrum, what is the liability of having properties in? Because there's better loan products for your personal name, right? So what's the liability of having properties in your personal name, and is there a way to protect that outside of the trust thing? Now that we've talked about trust, is there another way to protect with like umbrella policies or anything like that?
So yeah, I mean, in general, I don't know a single lawyer that doesn't have an umbrella policy. So anybody who, currently has insurance, you guys should consider an umbrella policy. Umbrella policies in general are like a walking, talking coverage wherever you are, whatever you're doing. However, in rental properties, I get very nervous when somebody tells me my rental property is in my personal name. The reason being is because if you have something happen in your house, whether or not your tenant trips or they're just a-holes, right? Like either way, you're getting sued. The problem is everything you own is now on the line to get caught up. So they can literally do a Liz Pence against your personal property and says that they're suing you for, let's say, $2 million. And it's a complete BS claim. You're now tied up in court with your personal assets that are also in your personal name. And as a lawyer, if somebody calls me and they're like, hey, I want to hire you to, sue Ryan. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is do an asset search on you. That's within 2 minutes. Just put your phone number in the systems I have. I can see what cars you drive. I can see all of your social media that's tied to all of your emails. I can see what you're worth. I can see sort of a gauged idea on what's in your bank account and all of the properties you own. So if it's all in your personal name, somebody says, I would like to sue him for X, right? First thing I'm doing is seeing how much you're worth. And if you're worth a lot, it's more worth my time to chase a BS claim, because I know that for you to defend the claim when all of your stuff is in your personal name means hourly fees from a lawyer. It means, you're going to worry about your house. Even if it's a BS claim, you're looking at 15 months of filing something in circuit court. And a lot of the time as lawyers, we're like, he's got a lot of assets. He's likely to settle for less if we just, push him. Now, if it's in your LLC name, again, I can't do the same asset search, right? Because there's supposed to be a veil. And LLCs are great if you do them right. But I will tell you that 85% of people, maybe 90, don't have their LLCs set up right.
Well,
we're going to have to get our LLC operating agreements over to Diana after this.
Oh, for sure. So if you have an LLC and somebody sues your LLC, but everything that your LLC owns is inside of a trust, does that protect you from them suing that LLC?
So it doesn't protect them, but I will tell you that and again, some lawyer is going to watch this and kill me, but we're lazy as lawyers. And what I mean by that is we just talked about me searching up Ryan by his phone number, right? If I do a search for a rental property that's in an LLC, and then I do, I check SDAT and I check all this and I see that a trust owns it. Now, in order to go after personal assets, I have to prove not only that, the LLC I have to pierce that corporate veil, which is 3 reasons why it might be pierced. Then I have to prove the trust is there just to protect you from liability. I, as a lawyer, now have 10 times the hard job to get to the personal reference of the person. And when I see that you have an LLC that's just for one rental property, I know some investors say 3 to 10 is safe, whatever, you're doing. As a lawyer, I'm going to be like, that's way too much work. Like this person's claim, the person's claim has to be way worth over their value for me to say, yeah, I'm going to take this claim on, right? Because a lot of these lawsuits are contingency based. I'm getting paid 30 to 40% of whatever I sue you on. So if I see that I have to go through an LLC and I have to go through a trust and I have to like break all these barriers, now I'm thinking time versus energy. And somebody's going to watch this and be like, man, lawyers are assholes. But it's the truth. Like we also make money off suing. So you're less of an easy target.
Okay. So what is your thought? You said 3 to 10 per LLC. Is there a number? Should it be separate LLCs or should it just always be trusts?
I think you should have a separate LLC for each of your rental properties. Like you should have a separate business that handles your rentals at the bare minimum. It's one trust that can own all the LLCs if you want to kind of do the double layer.
Because we have one LLC that owns all of the properties, minus a couple that we have in our personal names. But like that was like the ones that we bought that we lived in.
Do you have an operating agreement?
Yes.
Do you Okay. So the problem now is, all right, let's talk about that. I usually say one LLC per rental because what you're doing is, let's say somebody wants to sue you and they get hurt, right? If that LLC owns 10 properties, you have 10, to 15 properties that have equity in the house. So again, if once I file in the state of Maryland that I'm suing you for that one property, I'm suing the LLC, I can now make claims on the rest of your rental properties. And I can essentially freeze the ability for you to sell them or move them or anything else, which is going to get you to settle with me quicker because all of a sudden I'm holding hostage all of your properties.
But that's like bookkeeping for every single one, new tax returns for every single one. Like my bookkeeper would charge me, how much money we would spend in bookkeeping? Like, how do you get around that?
So I have a lot of people who what they'll do is they'll just do one trust account. So we're funneling it. So each LLC gets income in for the rental, right? And then you essentially pay into the trust every month or whatever your net equity is. And then the CPA just focuses on the trust money. And a CPA can do that for you. It's a little bit harder. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive. Your CPA probably would kill you with the amount of properties you have. But most normal people don't have 100 properties.
I don't have 100. He's got 100.
Most normal people are not Nick.
Yeah. That would be insane to file 100 tax returns.
If anything, focus on doing less. Like you have 90 something, I think you said. So I would focus on maybe doing 10 to 15 on each so that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. And that's sort of what worries me, right? And then you have to look at how do we pierce a corporate veil, right? And those are really 3 things. You don't have an operating agreement that you're following. Either you don't have an operating agreement or you're not doing minutes once a year for yourself. You're not computing everything in that operating agreement that's required in the state of Maryland to be considered a valid LLC. You're not doing those things. I can say it's basically you created the LLC to protect yourself, and I can pierce that corporate veil. The second one is how much money is your LLC kind of holding? Again, with you, I'm not too worried. You have 90 properties. You probably have a lot of money in that LLC account that's kind of swinging every month. But those people who have 1 rental or 2, they keep that cash very flush in that account, like very low in that account. That's a red flag. A judge will say, well, why do you only have, $2,000 in a business account? And they'll say this business is clearly just to funnel money into your personal account. And then the third one that we always see that happens is the commingling, right? Most of my clients in Baltimore City, they'll hire somebody to go do a quick job, like go handle my property. I need something painted. I need, the tub caulked, something very simple. This man goes, he gets it done, and all of a sudden he just takes cash out, right? And you're like, okay, let me just pay him. and you pay him from your personal account for a rental that's now in your LLC, you just commingled funds. Not intentionally, not on purpose. But as a lawyer, that's what I need. I just need that one time where you paid somebody not out of your account, even if they didn't take cash up. And then maybe you did it twice. And the first time you followed the rules in your operating agreement, but the second time you didn't. Now I'm showing that you are commingling. And that commingling is so easy to break. It happens all the time for investors.
That's interesting. That's an easy one to mess up because
Oh,
I
yeah.
could admit I shouldn't, but like I've done that like in the past. Not this year.
Not this year, but it's just human, right? Like when we live our lives, we don't think about what a lawyer is thinking about, right? Like when you ask me, I'm like, yeah, you should definitely have a contract for all those things, but that's not how humans operate. You're not thinking like I do. But if you're not talking to me about this stuff, right, there's ways for us to sort of make sure your operating agreement is loose enough that you can cover some of those incidents. But if you just get an operating agreement off Google, you're not doing yourself a favor.
So for all of those people that are listening and saying, oh shit, my operating agreement's probably terrible, can you amend them? Can you change them? Like how do you fix that?
So you can amend them, but I usually just what I'll do is I'll just create a whole new one and have all, the people who are part of the LLC or the S Corp or C Corp that you have just sign that the new one is the one that follows. And
so it'll just completely get rid of the other one.
Yep. And then, my law firm, I'm sure other lawyers as well, I know you're not going to read 130 pages of an operating agreement or, 60 pages or whatever it is. So I give you what's called the LLC playbook if you have an LLC, and it just goes over like it's 5 pages long. And it says, these are the things that you're required to do every single year. This is how you do them. This is how you should do them. And then I just give you that. And I'm like, this is what you care about. Like this is right here is what's going to protect you from a lawsuit. So if you haven't worked with a lawyer who's given you that, again, it's not expensive to talk to a lawyer. It's not, at least now, if you work with a law firm like mine, I give my cell phone out to my clients. You can text me general questions. I don't want to make money off you off a general question. I want you to use me for that building of wealth. I want you to use me when you start a new business. And I'm not going to make money if you call me and I charge you $400 to answer a general question.
So when I first created my LLC for the rental property, it was about 6 years ago, and I didn't create an operating agreement for like 2 years after I started it, and it was only because there were certain title companies that would allow me to purchase properties in my LLC without an operating agreement, and then I would go to like other title companies, and they would ask for it, and I always thought you need an operating agreement when there's multiple owners of the company. So they would ask for it, and I'm like, I don't have it. I've closed with this title company, and they didn't require me to have it. They're like, well, we need one, or you can't settle. So then I had to create one at that point, but for the longest time, I didn't have one.
Mm-hmm. So what Nick just admitted for any tenants in his properties is if you sue him, his operating agreement is off Google. It's probably like 10 pages long. Call him.
All right.
Well, I'll get it amended tonight.
I'm trying to rent out
So
one
you
of
can't
Nick's
call me because
properties.
this episode won't be out for another 2 weeks.
So
There
let's
you
just,
go.
hypothetically
Good try.
speaking, if I rented one of Nick's properties right now and tripped and fell, I could probably take him for a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. Just call me.
How many vacancies you got?
Too many.
I'll get one for me, one for Marcus over there. We'll get one. Diana will grab one.
And
we'll
the thing is,
we'll split them all up.
if you guys have
I'll take
insurance,
30.
which I'm sure you do, right? Like, just again, if you have one insurance policy versus 100, as a lawyer, I'm like, man, this guy owns 90 some properties. That's 100 policies that I can basically make an argument across that this company owned all of them and try to open up more deep pockets. Because remember, it's a numbers game. People are like, well, that's not legal. And I'm like, you know what? If I have the time to serve 100 insurance companies, one of them is going to be like, yeah, make this go away. So for example, we had a fire in one of our rental properties. It was completely my tenant's fault, like 100%. They set a fire. It was in a condo where we had like an HOA, a condo association, and then, they had rentals policy and nobody wanted to pay it out except for, and then, the renter's insurance was like, we're not paying it because this guy was negligent. So I'm sitting there like, okay, how do I protect myself from having to be responsible for basically almost burning down this building when nobody's insurance covered it? So I went to the rental insurance company and I said, hey, I get it. You don't want to pay this. This guy was negligent. Here's some bullshit legal argument. And I literally spammed them with like 3 pages of legal arguments that were complete BS. And they came back and basically called me out on it and were like, this is BS. Like, we're not paying this. And I said, cool, thanks. I noticed you're in Denver and I'm a lawyer in Maryland and I just made a legal argument. And the thing is, if you tell me that it's not true, but you're not using legal knowledge and you're not quoting the law, you're not responding in a legal fashion. So it's cool. I don't know if you can do that, but can I get your insurance number in Maryland? I'm just going to go ahead and file a complaint with the MIA that you're performing law because I just don't think you're doing that right. I kid you not, 2 days later, they called me and were like, we've made an executive decision to pay the repairs on this. Let us know if you have any questions. And the reason they did that is because they now know they have to hire a lawyer here at $400 an hour to argue my bullshit claims. I basically got away with it.
So is it better to have higher leverage on these properties versus than having properties that are paid off in those situations if you're getting sued?
Insurance companies are not going to want to pay, and with your operating agreement, there's no good answer. But yes, usually higher is better. But I worked for an insurance company when I got out of law school, and 95% of my job was to deny insurance claims by looking at operating agreements and power of attorneys and like life insurance claims just to find people who had BS documents. And the reason that was my job is because in the eyes of the law, when I say the word operating agreement or I say the word negligence, a lot of people are like, oh, that's an easy word to understand. That's a very different word in Maryland than in Virginia than Louisiana. So I would deny claims just based on using general documents that you didn't realize had statutory definitions.
Wow, there's a lot to think about here. So
I'm stressing these guys out. They're gonna they're both gonna call me after this and be like,
I did have a lot of other questions. Now I can't stop thinking about all these things that are going on right now.
I think what you're saying is I just made you a client.
Yeah, no,
this is important too, and you made me a client as well because after this, you're going to sit down here with me and write this agreement.
All right. I'm down for it.
I think it's something that like I've definitely overlooked, especially in the beginning. I feel like you're grinding to like build a business and like you barely have any money. I had negative money for so long, like just borrowing money, buying houses, building the business, that the last thing I want to hear is like, hey, do you got $4,000 to put your stuff in a trust? Like, I was like, well, I don't have any stuff. That's what I thought,
Right.
And then you snap your fingers and fast forward a couple of years and now you have a bunch of stuff and it's pretty much all just unprotected.
Right. And then I'll be very honest. I own 7 businesses, which means I have 7 LLCs. And I'm in the hot seat too, because when I started, I was grinding just like you. It's human nature. You're starting a new business. You're thinking about how am I going to market myself or how am I going to do all these things? And then you don't think about this because at that time you're piss broke. You're just like, yeah, I'm just going to like throw shit and see where it sticks and see how I can like go out and be on my own. And then next thing you know, like 3-4 years later, you're like, why don't I have a lawyer in my arsenal? And then that's when you realize. So I was guilty of the same thing, even though I am a lawyer. And now I'm like, okay, my operating agreement has to change too. It's just part of the business. And the more we think about it and put it as part of our yearly checklist of things that we need to make sure are okay, then that's okay. If you have a lawyer like me, I'll send you an email in December and be like, hey, there were no laws changed about operating agreements, or hey, I'll just take care of this for you. And then it works out, but a lot of lawyers are not as savvy, or maybe they'll just charge you a lot. And then the perception of $500 an hour, I can't afford that.
So I guess in terms of operating agreements, how does the wording change from like, let's say there's 2 people who are buying rental properties and they're very similar. Like what would change as far as like the wording in the operating agreements?
So the big things about having 2 partners in an operating agreement is when you don't have one, right? Or you do have one and you don't focus on things like what happens if one person wants to be bought out. So I have a client who actually just hired me. She didn't have an operating agreement, but her other business partner has decided, I don't want to do this anymore. And she doesn't want to do it because they're literally fighting over stupid shit. Like that, they're just being petty. I think, the person who was in the car with me when I took the call after I hung up, she was like, wow, why is that person being such a bitch for? Like, you're literally being hired because one person's being a bitch. And I was like, 100%. So they didn't have an operating agreement. So this chick goes into the business account and empties out half of it and takes it, right? And then she said, we're not doing any more events. They have commitments to the end of the year. And this person hired me and was like, what can I do? And I was like, well, where's your operating agreement? And they're like, well, we have one now. It doesn't address any sort of arguments or issues about partners or buyouts. We didn't do any of that because we thought we were going to be all good. And I'm like, well, now you got to hire a lawyer because you're stuck to whatever the state of Maryland says. And the state of Maryland says that if you have a disagreement and you don't have a how do we handle the situation, you got to wait for the court to decide, which is a 15-month time frame in Baltimore City.
So if you're a sole member LLC, is the operating agreement a lot shorter?
No,
Or can it be just as long?
no, because the whole idea behind you is even though you're a sole member LLC, remember LLCs are made to be able to give you multiple partners. It's a hybrid vehicle that we've now created for businesses. So the whole idea is, yes, you're a single member now, you may not be in the future. So we're creating an operating agreement that's going to show that you intend to grow your business. So it needs to cover things like when I die, what happens? How are my clients going to be handled if I no longer want to do this? So a lot of us who have operating agreements is like, yeah, man, like I own the business, the end. But really, if you get audited or you get an attorney involved, they're going to look at, did you have the consumers in mind when you created your operating agreement to protect the future? And if the answer is no, they'll be like, well, you didn't have an operating agreement to run a business. You literally created this just to create that boundary to protect yourself. And as a lawyer, I'm just looking for anything to sort of break that veil. And it's not one thing, but I'm looking for a pattern. If your operating agreement's not good, then you pay that guy with Cash App and you have like 90 properties in one LLC, and then you've put some money or like you've paid yourself sometimes, or you've gone drinking and I didn't see that expense as like a business client expense. Maybe your QuickBooks is a little weird. Now I found 4, 5, 6 flaws and I can sue you easier. Will I win in court? Maybe, but guess what? I've got time. You don't. 15 months of putting you through the ringer, you're going to eventually settle with me. And that's the game. The game is that when somebody hires a lawyer, they're like, this person's working on contingency. Nick's got 100 properties. You want to go? Like, absolutely. Let's see what we can do. And he'll settle quickly because all your properties are tied up now.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Nick's going to hire me after this. This is worth the drive.
I have 2 weeks
Worth
to get
the
everything
drive
together.
for you, for sure. So, okay. So, as far as businesses and business partners, do you say that you should have some sort of buy-sell agreement before or during? Like, is that in the operating agreement?
Yeah,
That's
we have basically like a buyout clause, or like what happens if one dies. Those kind of things, right? Like just have it because it's from a consumer standpoint. Did you protect the consumer? And 2, did you have the intentions to grow the business? So you should have those in there, even if you're a sole member. If I die, such and such person will do it. And remember now, Virginia, we're not in Virginia, but Virginia now said that in a lot of these LLCs, you have to essentially name the person who's going to take it over in your operating agreement. And then you're looking at issues. I'm sure all of you have heard, open your LLC in Delaware or open your LLC in this state because you're paying less taxes. This is very true, right? Wherever you're operating and your main home is that's where your tax base is. But if your rental properties are still in Maryland and your operating agreement isn't focused on Maryland statutes within it, saying if we get sued for this and jurisdiction is Maryland, we'll cover these bases. What you're now doing is you're stuck in Delaware law, whereas the person suing you is stuck in Maryland law, and they're going to win because your properties are here. So you have to sort of address that across the board. And it's not every state, right? But you should have an attorney review it if you're doing business outside of the state your LLCs are. Just have an attorney look at it and be like, hey, is this good? If I get sued here, do I need to add any verbiage in my operating agreement that's going to cover me?
Okay. For business owners or partners, or even, I guess, single person business owners, do you suggest having life insurance as well? And can you explain that a little bit more? Because I've been going through this process recently and just like, I'm, I guess, getting sold on life insurance right now.
Oh, good.
Because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because both my partner and I are key men or key people, I guess, to be politically correct.
Yeah.
Don't want to be, women can operate businesses too. Look at Diana.
There you go.
So because if one of us died, then the business would struggle to like go on.
Mm-hmm.
So it would need some sort of like financial like reparations or something. Like, is that right?
Yeah. So you should have life insurance in general, right? A lot of us are entrepreneurs, so we have to have our own policies. So I'm going to kind of go from work, kids, and then we'll talk about entrepreneurs as well. For those of you who have kids, you should get them life insurance at a young age. I know that sounds really weird. People are like, I don't want to think about my 6-month-old dying, right? But to out myself, I have an autoimmune disease. I'm type 1 diabetic. I got diagnosed when I was 8. At 18, when I needed to get life insurance, it's almost impossible to get it without paying a shitload of money. I mean, I'm talking like $1,000, $2,000 a month just because I'm type 1 diabetic, not because I'm unhealthy. It's literally, you have 3 kids. This is your age. This is how much it's going to cost. And the amount of money I make a month to cover what life insurance would cover, the fees are.
So it goes by what you're making?
So it's how much coverage you want, right? So for me, if I get life insurance as the primary breadwinner of my house, I know what threshold my husband would need, right, if I demise. So I'm like, if I need life insurance, I need to think about the total coverage that's going to get paid out. And then I also have this autoimmune. If you get life insurance for a child at the age of 18, they have 2 options. They can kind of buy out and get some of the money that you've put into the life insurance since they were little, or they can continue that coverage after 18 at the price you were paying when they were 6 months old.
Do you know what percent that they would get if they choose the buyout option at 18?
I don't, but I can definitely get that answer and get you back.
What do you think it would be? Just like a guess.
I would assume it's anywhere between 50 to 60% of what you put in.
And are you, if you get life insurance for your kids, are they locked in at that same rate throughout their whole life?
Yeah.
Is that also benefit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if something happens to them.
So the older you get, the more expensive you get.
Right. So again, if my parents had gotten it when I was like 3 years old, I mean, just using numbers today, I have all 3 of my kids insured, and I'm paying like literally $20 to $30 a month. It's very small because I got it right when they were born. But if they get type 1 diabetes like I did when I was 8, at 18, they wouldn't see that increase, and they could continue that coverage, which then even if they say, okay, we're going to increase it for like fluctuation and we're going to make it $130 now, they can't look at your medical history, which is the big factor for your kids. It's a big benefit for them because you just don't know what, if anything, they might get diagnosed with. And life insurance is not something we're thinking about at 18 years old. Most of our kids will be like, yeah, I'll just take the buyout. But as parents, we can say, hey, don't do that. Keep it going. It's not that expensive. We'll maintain it for you. You just don't know.
Well, whose option is it? Is it the 18-year-olds or the parents' option?
It's the 18-year-old, but I would hope
really?
that...
So they can just...
Yeah. I would hope that your 18-year-old would ask questions, though. Yeah. And again, you can also do things like if you had a trust and you die before they turn 18, you could say that, the portion of your wealth is not going to them unless they continue the life insurance policy. So I could create that for you. Just, going back to that. Now, if you have a work insurance plan, which I think most people who are not entrepreneurs, this is what they see. A couple of the issues that you're going to find is that life insurance in the state of Maryland, at least, the requirement to pay out is much longer in an employee plan than a private plan. So the problem is, right, if an employee plan doesn't have to pay out your claim till 12 months, you're dealing with whatever company your employer chose. So Transamerica usually pays out pretty quickly, but some others don't. So the problem then is you die, you have employee provided life insurance. They have 12 to 24 months to pay out. They may examine your medical record. When did you start the job? Did you have medical? Like, there's a lot of questions they can look at, while your spouse or your children now have a $30,000 burial that they have to force and also make up the income while they're waiting for that life insurance policy. Whereas private life insurance has different payout requirements and it's much quicker. So that in and of itself, people are like, I'm covered by my job. And I'm like, you should get a second one. Like, just do it. It's not going to be much. Make sure you know how much your employer is actually covering. Because
that to me is like huge, because the quickness of the payout, because if your business partner dies and you're both fully operating the business together and it's doing a couple $100,000 a month and you don't have somebody to do that, you could go broke in a couple of weeks.
Right.
So are these life insurance companies similar to attorneys in the sense that they try to find any, not loophole, but like anything to penetrate reasons why they shouldn't pay out a life insurance policy?
Absolutely. I worked at Transamerica Life Insurance when I was in law school and a little bit after. It was a very nice corporate job, 9 to 5. I couldn't do it because my job was to literally just deny life insurance claims. I kid you not, Transamerica's probably going to sue me that I say this out loud. They had me go through medical records. They had me look at, was there a beneficiary change in the last 10 years? Did this person, we had situations where it was like, did this person have a beneficiary change where maybe somebody died or they got divorced? And in that case, if they had dementia, look through their medical records and see if it's possible that it got diagnosed late. And can we make an argument that they weren't in their right mind when they changed the beneficiary? They literally dig through all of that.
That's so scummy.
That's why I don't
damn.
work there anymore.
Yeah.
It was a
God
nice
damn.
job as far as pay goes, though.
Oh man. So with the business, you're getting paid pretty quickly though when you're owning your business.
So if it's like an independent insurance, then absolutely. And you have several different ways you could do it. I always say, like, if you have a chunk of cash, you could do like one of those term insurance where that essentially you buy into it and then you could take it out as you get older. But there's also, outside of just life insurance, you guys should invest in, I can't remember the name, but it's basically insurance that'll cover you if you need like hospice stay or any sort of like rehab stay. Those kind of things you don't need till your 60s or 70s, but getting enrolled, the closer you get to Medicare and Medicaid, it's very expensive. And, you know, just as a personal note, my mom is 70, and she got really sick really fast last year. It was completely unexpected. She went to, Cancun. She was in the hospital 3 days later. And then she was in the ICU for 7 months. And then she needed rehab care. And I very quickly learned that if she wanted to go to one of these care places, we were looking at $15,000 to $20,000 a week. And she had Medicare and Medicaid and still wouldn't cover it. And they started talking about asset protection. They were like, do you have insurance to cover this stay? And I was like, yeah, my mom barely can pay her bills. Like, no, she doesn't have insurance. So, if she had her house in a trust, then we would worry a little less about it.
Okay, so we learned trusts and operating agreements so far.
And insurance.
And life insurance.
And life insurance.
And life
Right.
insurance.
Okay, I have another topic. Quick one, maybe. Marriage.
Oh, I love this one.
So let's just hypothetically say you have a couple of businesses and a couple of properties and you have a business partner, and then you get married and just something doesn't work out and you get divorced, right? If the person doesn't really have any money, but the business has a lot of money, can that spouse still go after the business? And how did you do that how does it look, I guess, essentially, like if you get sued and you have all your money in your business? Not saying this is me or anything.
Of course not.
But most of your money is in your business accounts and it's tied to somebody else completely because you have a business partner. Can they literally say like, okay, well, if you have 500 grand in your bank account, you got to empty out your 250 and split it with them?
Yeah. So they would, there's actually like bank assessment people that a lawyer will hire to look through your bank statements, figure out how much your business partner put into that. They'll figure out how much your business partners put into them, basically figure out what their portion is if you don't have an operating agreement, because you could stop that in an operating, right? You could cover those bases. But if you don't, we basically hire somebody to look through finances and determine how much is your soon to be divorced business partner worth in that business. And then whatever that portion is, she has rights to it, she or he. But just to give you an idea, again, Maryland is a little bit different. We're an equitable state. So a lot of people are like, I brought it into the marriage, therefore it belongs to me. Not in the state of Maryland. State of Maryland, once you're married, it's all marital property. It's equitable, which doesn't mean split 50-50, right? Like if you're bringing 60% of the income into the marriage, we make an argument you should get 60% out. But my husband's never leaving me because I owe $200,000 worth of student loan debt. And if we get divorced, according to the state of Maryland, he's responsible for half.
I got to get some more debt. So, okay.
But postnuptials exist, and I do those as well.
Okay.
Post what?
Postnuptials.
So not a prenup, but a postnup.
Oh, okay.
So it happens after the marriage.
Gotcha.
Now, what about, is marriage the only thing that makes that? Because I know, I forget who it was, but a friend of mine, their friend, is doing some sort of like, they've been living together for X amount of years. They're not getting married, but they're domestic partners or something like that. That's a thing?
That's a thing. It's called a common law marriage.
So can that person go after your business too after a while?
Yeah, they can make the argument. If it quacks like a duck and acts like a duck. If I'm acting like I'm married to you, I've invested everything. Now, I will say that that is very turbulent to politics because common law marriage was a bigger thing when same-sex marriage wasn't legal, right? Because we couldn't make an argument that you could have gotten married if you wanted to, right? So now we're seeing that less, and we're seeing judges be a little bit more, if you wanted to be married, you should have gotten married. But we still see it. And again, same-sex marriage may not stay legal, right? I mean, the Supreme Court could reverse the decision. It could change with politics. So common law marriage is not going away, which is just the idea of if you're acting like you're married, you live together, you have shared expenses, you could make an argument for that.
So can a trust come into play in anything that we just discussed in terms of like having your business in a trust? Would that protect if you got a divorce? And
Yeah.
okay,
But it had to be
would.
in the trust before you got married.
Well, no, you could do it after. You could, like, because again, if you're transferring the ownership from your envelope to another one, your intent is there. So you can say that this business, we just make the trust irrevocable, meaning like it cannot be changed. And you just say that like this is between me and a business partner. It's not an asset for anything else. And that's why some business partners prefer that trust because it protects more than an LLC, right? Because those are two parties' intentions. You created a contract. You essentially created all that ahead of time. And now your spouse can't touch it because there's a document that protects it more.
Wow.
But so in that scenario, it's protected, but not if you got sued through your LLC that's in a trust. It's not as protected as that.
So a trust will protect you the most in most cases. The big issue that we're going to look at is when did you create the trust versus when did the lawsuit or the divorce happen, right? I've had people that call me and they're like, I'm getting sued. Can we do a trust right now? And I'm like, we can. But, you know, if somebody looks too closely, they're going to notice that, you know, you got called into a deposition and then 2 days later we created a trust. So that's why I always talk about do it sooner rather than later. Do it before the conversation of divorce comes up. Do it before these things come up and think about, you know, 10 years, 15 years from now. If you're not thinking outside of a year or two and you're not thinking worst case, you're not building your wealth. You're not protecting your wealth.
So is a prenup very similar to like an operating agreement as pertains to business?
Yep. Yeah.
Pretty much like the same thing. You just outline how you want things to
So
happen.
before we get married, your stuff is my stuff. We decide like what happens if we have kids, you know, what happens if we get divorced, who keeps what. You sort of lay it out on the table. The only big thing with prenups is kid-wise, they're not going to let you disadvantage your kid. So what I mean by that is if you then get married and your prenup says we're not going to pay child support, but the other person then gets a divorce and is like, I can't take care of my kid, the state of Maryland's going to be like, no, like it doesn't matter what your prenup says. Like you brought this child into the world. We're going to invalidate the prenup when it comes to children because it's our duty to protect them. Outside of that, you're pretty safe. And again, the threshold for child support is so little. So your prenup can say, I'm not paying you more than, you know, the minimum required by child support, which protects you if you have a lot of money to basically have that.
Yeah,
And
you hear of all these like famous people that are like getting hit with like $200,000 a month, like
Yep.
child support or whatever divorce things, and it's like they have it written into like the thing that's like 20,000 for hair products, like a ridiculous. Like I'm not even like exaggerating
Yeah.
it, I don't think, but you see like all these crazy numbers, and you're like, God damn, nobody needs that much money
Yeah.
to live, but like just because they were living like that this way,
Yeah.
they deserve to keep living this way.
The idea is you provided a quality of life. I was a stay-at-home, you know, wife, and I provided for you. Without me, you would have never been able to accomplish all this. So just because we're now getting divorced, you're worth this much because I supported you through that. So my quality of life shouldn't diminish now because I gave up my life to support you. So a prenup actually will allow you to waive spousal support if you wanted it to.
And then, so assets that you bought before you're married, is that still split 50-50 if there's a divorce, or is there like a rule that says...
It's equitable, right? So you can make an argument that was mine beforehand, but the other spouse could argue, right?
But you managed it the whole time that she was supporting you.
Right, exactly. So it's equitable, right? It doesn't mean 50-50, but a lot of the time I tell people, like, listen, if you're divorcing somebody who's got a lot of stuff, you got a lot of wiggle room. You got a lot of wiggle room to argue. So that's why those prenups and the postnups are so important. And the trusts.
Prenup, postnup, trust. We're gonna be forking over like $20,000 tomorrow to DK
Well,
login.
tonight. We're going to put it together tonight.
Hey, the good news is I take Apple Pay. So
Oh, great.
y'all
I don't have Apple, so great. Ryan's got it.
Oh, let's talk about that for a second. So people that have Android phones,
Raise your
Do you
hand.
even represent them?
No, I mean, I don't like the green bubbles.
Yeah.
I can't fuck with that.
That's
Sorry.
what I was gonna say. I was like, yeah, I don't even know if she'd even represent you.
I just have to message you on WhatsApp.
You know
Yeah.
what? I met you guys both at a bar a couple weeks ago for the first time. I think I text Nick afterwards, just be like, "Hey, it was nice meeting you." He didn't even respond, so we're not even.
I don't
going
think
there.
you texted me. I would have responded.
Look at him.
If you were-
He's like he's sweating a little bit.
If you were at the last Everyday Millionaire meetup, Nick had a really good time.
He did.
Yeah, Nick
We're not
was
going
was
to
fun.
talk about
Nick
that.
was feeling good at the end of that
Yeah.
night. Okay, so we are gonna have another meetup coming up, so you guys are gonna have to sponsor that.
Absolutely.
My brain is so full of I feel like I have so many things to say, but
It's just like processing
I'm like
right now.
I just
processing
gave you a
all
lot.
of the words that you said today. It was like there was so many.
Did I also mention I do real estate? So call me for that too if you want me to throw a
So,
couple of things in
so
there.
you do property management, you said.
So yeah, my husband does. I'm an owner to it, but really I don't like it very much. I like to be on the legal side of it. So, if you want to like evict people, you want to talk about like, hey, licensing issues, all that, like I don't like to really represent tenants, but I will preface with I am seen as one of the top real estate lawyers in the state, right? And I'm not just being full of myself. Like it's
So what do you want people that are listening to this show to call you tomorrow and say, this is what I need from you? Like, what are your top services that you're trying to get out there to the world?
so my client base is really the people who are like you guys, investments, who are doing a lot of stuff. And I kind of do the one-stop shop. Like I'm not going to do drama law. But you want to set up a trust. You want to protect your generational wealth. I'm there for it. And the other thing is, don't call me after you get in trouble with your rentals. Call me now. Let me look at what you look like, and we'll talk about where your flaw points are. And once we start having that conversation, you'll find that like, even if I'll tell you things like, don't do this right now, but maybe think about it 5 years from now. Like this is, if you get sued on this, this is the issue and sort of the thing you're looking at. The other big thing is once you have me on retainer, if one of your tenants wants to sue you and they come to me, there's a conflict issue. So there's a lot of people who have me on retainer who then I usually get contacted with by tenants for lawsuits. Because again, I'm kind of highly rated on the real estate aspect there. So I have the ability to kind of call you and be like, I can't tell you why, but you're getting sued. Somebody contacted me. You're on my retainer, so there's a conflict, but I'm telling you right now, maybe check out your property at XYZ. I've done that a few times.
Okay, good to know. So DK Law Group, and you practice just in Maryland, right?
Yes, my title company does Virginia, but come on, that's boring.
Yeah, no. So, all right. So trusts, real estate law, looking at general businesses and seeing.
Yep.
I know Nick and I are both going to do that. So how can they get in touch with you?
So I give my cell phone out to all my clients. I think that's how I sold you, Ryan. My cell number, 443-739-6724. Shoot me a text. I'll get you the rest. But
You're literally going to get 1,000 texts in 2 weeks from now. You're going to wonder why.
that's fine. I mean, I have a staff who handles it, but I don't believe in giving you a bullshit number. Like, I'm a human. I might take a day to respond, but I'm not going to put red tape. Like, text me. We'll talk.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I was just like, all right, this is who I'm using, because the lawyer that we've been using, that we went through a big lawsuit with, and all this stuff, it's a nightmare trying to get in touch with these people. Like, you got to talk to the assistant that talks to this person, and then they leave a message, and then they call back. My one collections lawyer was like, she's a nice person, but I messaged her with like a really big problem that I had about a collections case, and she sent me a Calendly like link, and it was like 2 weeks out that I could like schedule a phone call with her, and I'm like, this is not okay. So that's when I told my assistant Jocelyn, I was like, do not send this other attorney any more documents. Like, wait for DK
Awesome.
to hit you guys up, because
And look, I've got assistants, I've got a Calendly, I've got all that. But if you just have a quick question, I'll answer it. Like if I say like, hey, this is like way outside the scope, I don't want to text you legal advice. It still won't be 2-3 weeks out unless it's something where I'm like, yeah, you got nothing to worry about. I'm going on vacation, but I'm available and I will answer your texts.
Awesome. So DK Law Group, Diana, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot. My head is going to be spinning all night long. On our new set, so you guys know, this is all going to be filled up with stuff. We're going to be offering ad space, so we'll put your logo up on the wall. We're going to have some shelves. We're going to have some cool stuff. So if you're looking to advertise with us, it's coming soon. We're building the set. So
they're going to have to pay for my services. So you're going to see my ad space up there
Yeah.
just as an IOU.
There you go.
Right?
There you go. It'll be front and center, DK Law Group. So then
And,
we're protected.
Keep an eye out for our next event. By the time this comes out, this will probably be early December.
Yeah.
So our event's going to be in January. I think. Did we nail
I
down a
think
date
January
yet?
11th, we're thinking. So we'll announce it officially soon. But last one was a huge success. Had over 100 people there. It was super fun. We're getting a bigger venue, more sponsors, more people. So it's going to be a good time.
And I'll be there, and I'm going to go for the TV this time.
And Diana's going to win a TV. Maybe.
There you go.
Maybe. All right, guys. Until next time.
All right.